Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, my wife will walk into a classroom and teach for the 30th year in a row. And the one thing any teacher can tell you is that the last person you want to base your performance on, judge your performance, is the administrator of the school. That's the first thing everybody figures out if you teach. There needs to be performance-based pay. The way to do it is start at the front end. Pay those people who perform in undergraduate school, give them the alternative to be able to go, they get the same pay as an engineer gets to go in and work as a math student, as a math teacher, as a science teacher, etc. So you start performance-based pay by, in fact, paying the best performing students who want to teach and give them a chance. Every other major country in the world is starting their kids at the same salary they start these students, the same salary they start their engineers. We should be able to do that. My father used to say, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget. If you, in fact, value education, then it should be equally as important as engineering or anything else.
We're running towards the end of the 90 minutes. I have a couple quick questions and then a final question. This is basically a yes-no question. We've seen all this turmoil in the markets over the last couple of weeks caused by the credit crunch and the crisis in the mortgage markets. We saw on Friday the Federal Reserve lowered the discount rate for banks. Should they lower rates for everyone else, yes or no?
I'm glad they did what they did, but it can't be just left to a bailout for the banks. We've got to figure out how we're going to work out people facing foreclosures. And I think a number of us have recommendations on that do not lend themselves to an easy yes or no.
Yes, I think it'll happen in September, but we also need more liquidity. They ought to be allowing Fannie and Freddie Mac to put more liquidity in the market. It is seized up. You can't get a mortgage in America today.
I agree with that, but we also need a home rescue fund for all the millions of Americans who are worried about losing their homes.
All I would say, there's no answer to that question. Just follow the money of the people on this dais and you'll see a response.
This is the Katrina of the mortgage lending industry. The answer to your question is yes, there has to be more liquidity, more funds in the market, but we need is more transparency between those that are making this business happen. And what we also need to do is to not appoint officials that are in the industry to regulate that specific industry. The mortgage industry, they've become, a lot of them, a bunch of loan sharks.
The answer is yes, but we need, as the governor says, more transparency, particularly with regard to hedge funds and private equity funds. They're the ones that are causing this thing to go under. And there's no transparency, no accountability. We don't know how deep this problem is. Chris will take care of it in the banking committee, and I mean that sincerely, but we don't know how deep this problem is. But I think it's much deeper. It's almost as deep in terms of dollars, not liabilities, the savings and loan crisis.
We do need more liquidity, but we're going to have to not only help homeowners who are going to be losing their homes as a consequence of this. We're going to have to go forward and make sure that we've got the kinds of tough regulation when it comes to financial instruments to make sure that people who have saved and are trying to get their own home for the first time are not hoodwinked out of it. And unfortunately, the reason that we haven't had tougher regulation in part goes back to the issue of lobbying. This is where special interests have been driving the agenda. We have not had the kinds of consumer protections that are in place. And that's why when we have this debate about lobbying, we have to remind ourselves it has very real consequences for the people of Iowa and the people around the country.
The answer is no. The Fed is actually looking at bailing out the creditors, and what we're looking at is a continuation of the problem and a postponement of the day of reckoning. We need to have a government take strong action where we'll loan money to those who are in trouble, but we need to do that in exchange for having the power that the money lending power that the banks have right now come back to the government. Government spends money into circulation, and then government can maintain control over the economy. Unless we take this action, we're looking at a situation of the collapse of our economy, and we're looking at a situation where these hedge funds will try to get a bailout while millions of Americans lose their homes. Save the American homeowners.
Final round, final question, about 30 seconds each, please. You know, presidential biographers are always looking at the turning point in a life, the moment where an ordinary person went on the path to the presidency, the decisive moment. Congressman Kucinich, what's a decisive moment in your life?
I would say the decisive moment in my life was when my family was living in a car in the inner city, and I thought about all the dreams that I could have as a child, and I decided at an early age that I was going to be someone and I've had a lot of help along the way to get to this stage, but I can tell you, as president, the American people will have someone who remembers where he came from and has the compassion in his heart to lift up everyone to make sure everyone has a chance. Thank you.
A decisive moment in my life was the transition from high school to college, because I had gone through a difficult time not knowing my father, and was at times an angry young man, and partly because the values my mother had instilled in me, those were reawakened in college. And it made me serious about not just what I could do for myself, but what I could do for other people. It's what led me to become a community organizer. It's what led me to go into public service. And ultimately, it's what led me to this stage.
George, there's a lot of things in my life that led me to be engaged in politics. I worked in the African-American community east side of my city as the only white employee for a long while when I was a kid, and I got involved in the civil rights movement. But I thought the question was, what made me run for president?
Or a decisive moment in your life that put you on the broader path?
Well, the decisive moment in my life to put me in the broader path was the civil rights movement. When I found out and realized that it does make a difference if you're engaged. You actually can change people's lives. You can actually change the state of the nation.
Governor Richardson?
Decisive moment in my life was when my wife Barbara decided and agreed to marry me, because it was the best decision I ever made, and hopefully she ever made. We've had 35 years of marriage. It has given me strength and has been an anchor in my life. A decisive moment for me, return to public life, was 9/11. When it happened, I wanted to get back in public life, and I just want to make one point. I
got to move on. We're going to run out of time. Sorry.
The decisive moment in my life came with the insightfulness of realizing that human governance is extremely complex and that representative government is broken. And there's only two venues for change. One is the government, where the problem lies, or the people. And so the people must be equipped as lawmakers, the central power of government, in order to make decisions on all the policy issues that affect their lives, working in partnership with elected government. It's a win-win. The people make the policy decisions, and we then would make the day-to-day operation of government work better.
Senator Edwards.
When I was a young boy, I came downstairs one morning. It was still dark outside. My father, who worked in mills all his life, was sitting at the kitchen table. The television was on. He was watching public television, and he'd never been able to go to college, and he was trying to learn from public television so he could get a better job in the mill. And I worked in the mill myself part-time when I was younger, and I made the decision then, whatever I did with my life, didn't know that I'd be running for president, but whatever I did with my life, those are the people that I would fight for as long as I was breathing.
Senator Dodd?
Well, there were two moments. One was the decision to join the Peace Corps, getting excited about John Kennedy inviting a generation of us to be a part of things larger than ourselves. And the second was about a week before my father died, when he was asked the question, had he known how his life would end, would he do it all over again? I'll never forget him saying he'd do it in a minute, because you can never do as much for the public good as you can through a public life.
Last word, Senator Clinton.
Well, when I was growing up, I didn't think I would run for president, but I could not be standing here without the women's movement, without generations of women who broke down barriers, the civil rights movement that gave women and people of color the feeling that they were really part of the American dream. So I owe the opportunity that I have here today to many people, some of whom are known to history and many who aren't. But more personally, I owe it to my mother, who never got a chance to go to college, who had a very difficult childhood, but who gave me a belief that I could do whatever I set my mind to.
And that is the last word. Thank you all very much. We'll see you.